The park fell dead silent the moment Karen grabbed the mic. I have an announcement about my stepdaughter Luna, she began, smiling like she'd practiced the line. She's useless, just dead weight. Either she starts pulling her weight here, or she can leave. 50 relatives exploded into laughter. Cousins I'd grown up with snorted and pointed as if I were a joke. They didn't know I'd quietly been covering most of the household bills. They didn't know I'd been keeping the lights on. I'm Luna. I'm 28, a nurse practitioner at a busy clinic downtown. I make a decent living helping families through their worst days. I wear scrubs, carry stethoscopes, and spend my shifts fighting to keep people alive. But when I came home to my father's house, I lived like a ghost. Dad remarried when I was 22. Karen moved in with him, bringing twin teenage boys and an air of constant performance. I had moved back for what I thought would be a temporary season, to help with the adjustment. That temporary season stretched into 6 long years. 6 years of being treated like the household help, expected to clean, cook, and smile while everyone else enjoyed the benefits. Karen made sure everyone knew what a generous martyr she was for letting me stay. She'd whisper about the burden of having a grown woman under the same roof, roll her eyes at my job, and brag to neighbors about her patience. Her sons acted like I'd been hired to serve them. They left dirty laundry on the floor, crumbs on the couch, and expected me to pick up after them. When friends visited, they introduced me with a shrug. This is my dad's daughter. She still lives here. As if my life was something to be embarrassed of. I slept in a cramped back room between stacks of nursing textbooks and a pile of scrubs, invisible at family gatherings, unseen in the daily rotation of lives that mattered more than mine. But the thing they didn't know, the truth I kept to myself, was that I was financially independent. I handled my own bills. Quietly, I'd been the one helping in ways no one suspected. Karen loved these reunions. They were her stage. On this particular afternoon at Riverside Park, 50-plus relatives gathered, and she shone, the picture-perfect wife and mother, center of attention. I spent the morning arranging tables, setting out the food, refilling drinks, making sure every detail matched her flawless image. While Karen held court and traded compliments with the aunts, I was the one hustling behind the scenes. Her boys were off playing volleyball and not bothering to lift a finger. That was typical. I was always the invisible engine. Then, over lunch, my Aunt Patricia lobbed the first barb, loud enough that nearby tables fell quiet. Luna, why are you still living at home at 28? She asked. Most girls your age are married and on their own. Karen's face lit up. This was her cue. Oh, Patricia, thank you for your concern, she said, syrupy sweet. But really, Luna is just dead weight. She lives here for free and never contributes. It's time she paid rent, or she should move out. The laughter started, the kind that makes your stomach drop. Heads nodded. Uncle Bob barked agreement and lifted his beer like a toast to injustice. She should be grateful for free housing, he declared. Not everyone gets to freeload into their 30s. Her sons leaned in, smirking. Tyler, the older twin, sneered, she never helps. Just eats our food and complains about being tired from her nurse job. Mason shrugged, like it was obvious nursing wasn't real work. They treated my profession, the one that keeps people breathing, like a hobby. My face burned. 50 relatives were sharing a moment at my expense, mocking me as if I were a punchline. My own family, the people who should have defended me, were eating up the spectacle. I tried to speak up. I do contribute, I murmured, barely cutting through the noise. Karen waved me off like a bothersome fly. Your little nurse job barely covers anything, she said loudly enough for everyone to hear. Nobody's fooled. The laughter grew louder. The humiliation was public and perfect for them, a ritual scorn meant to shame and isolate. This public degradation wasn't new. It was just the loudest incident in a pattern that had started 6 years earlier. I remember the night my dad first asked for help, his voice frayed. Luna, honey, we need some help with the mortgage this month, he said. It was supposed to be one payment, then another. The requests multiplied. Each time I gave what I could. I never announced it. I didn't want thanks or pity. I only wanted to help my family through rough patches. But each payment seemed to chip away at my presence in that home. turning me into an unpaid volunteer who'd been politely reduced to invisible labor. Every little indignity added up. The way Karen announced my shortcomings with a smile, the casual contempt from cousins, the way her boys saw me as part of the domestic scenery. People assume generosity is visible, that if someone helps you give public credit. Karen made a show of being charitable, loud, theatrical, and eager for applause. She framed me as a burden she was reluctantly tolerating, and everyone took the script she wrote for them. What they didn't know was how much they would lose if they actually pushed me out. They didn't know that the quiet checks I'd slipped into the household funds, the calls I'd answered at 3 a.m., and the quiet support I'd given behind closed doors were the real scaffolding holding things together. They had reduced me to a caricature, a lazy grown-up who eats their food, when in truth I was the opposite, competent, self-sufficient, and quietly involved. Sitting there, humiliated and burning inside, something in me shifted, not because of the laughter, but because of the carelessness with which they assumed my worth. They decided my story without asking me. They judged my life by appearances. The shame they intended to inflict was supposed to make me small. Instead, it lit something like calm resolve. I let the silence hang a fraction longer than it needed to. I'd learned over the years that a well-timed pause makes people uncomfortable in the way that finally reveals what they really think. I wasn't interested in a scene. I wasn't interested in guilt-tripping my father or embarrassing Karen in front of the aunts. Not in that park, not when the teenagers were laughing and the potato salad was getting cold. But I had a choice: continue to fade into their background, or quietly reveal that their assumptions were wrong. They had labeled me helpless, helplessly dependent. In truth, I'd been picking up pieces they didn't notice. I'd been paying the bills they enjoyed, showing up when they needed stability. The truth was mine to tell, and I didn't have to do it theatrically. Not everyone wants a spectacle. Some of us prefer to undo the story from behind the curtain, silently and with intent. So I held my head high and let the anger that had been simmering for years transform into a steady clarity. They thought they'd expose me. In a way, they had, but not the way they expected. The laugh lines on their faces, the satisfied nods of people who loved a good takedown, the smug look of a woman who's convinced she's won, all that would be revealed in time as short-sighted. This community I'm telling my story to, people who've been told they're not enough, know the feeling. We know what it is to be reduced to someone else's narrative, to be shrunk by a careless phrase. If that's you, stay. Subscribe. There are more of us than they think. Tell your story in the comments. We'll see who really holds things together when the applause dies down and it's just the bills, the kids, and the quiet nights. The reunion ended with pats on the back for Karen and nods of approval for Uncle Bob. They went home full of certainty. I walked away with my own kind of certainty, that their version of me was false, and that truth, even when it is shared quietly, has a way of shifting the ground under people's feet. For 6 months, I was footing their $3,000 mortgage, plus utilities, groceries, and the twins' private school fees. Dad would look at me with tears of gratitude and promise it was only temporary. Karen would pat my arm and say, "You're such a good daughter, but gratitude doesn't last forever." Then Karen started telling a different story to anyone who would listen. One afternoon, I heard her over the fence with Mrs. Henderson, laughing. "We're basically running a charity here," she said. "Luna can't afford her own place, so we let her stay out of the goodness of our hearts. She chips in a little, but mostly we support her." Meanwhile, I was paying $4,500 a month to live in a house where I was treated like an inconvenience. Neighbors began to look at me with pity. "Poor Luna, still living with her dad at 26, they would whisper. "Poor Luna, can't make it on her own. Lucky to have such generous in-laws." The credit stealing was worse than the financial drain. When Tyler got into his dream college, Karen threw a huge party and invited the whole neighborhood. "We're so proud," she announced, glowing. All those sacrifices finally paid off. While I stood in the kitchen doing the dishes, I knew every cent of Tyler's tuition, books, lab fees, dorm deposits. Even his laptop had come from my account. Karen accepted the applause like she'd written every check herself. Mason's graduation was the same script. We'd invested everything in his future. Karen stepped forward and told the crowd how parents must make sacrifices for their kids. More clapping for Karen. More erasure for me. Dad enabled it all. Whenever I tried to explain how invisible I felt, he'd give the same tired excuse. You know how Karen gets about money, sweetheart. She doesn't mean to sound ungrateful. It's hard on everyone. I wanted to scream. It's not hard on everyone. I was the one working 12-hour shifts at the clinic, then coming home to cook, clean, and be blamed for costing the family money. Lying awake in my tiny room at night, I would stare at the ceiling and wonder if maybe they were right. Maybe I was a burden who couldn't make it alone. Those were the darkest moments. But during lunch breaks at work, instead of sad desk salads, I was planning my exit. I had been living a double life for 2 years. On weekends, I told them I was visiting friends or running errands. The truth was I drove 3 hours to the coast to check on a beach condo I'd been renovating in secret. My grandmother, Dad's mother, had left it to me in her will, expressly bypassing him. She'd written that she trusted I would value what others took for granted. The trust fund that came with the property was enough for a down payment and 2 years of renovations. While Karen griped about my little nurse job, I used my paycheck to rebuild a rundown condo into something warm and livable. Strange mail arrived for me that I hid before anyone could see it. Contractor estimates, paint swatches, furniture catalogs. When Karen asked about the letters, I lied and said they were medical journals or work documents. My phone calls became furtive, stepping onto the porch to speak to contractors, real estate agents, and consultants about starting a private practice. When Dad wondered who I was talking to, I shrugged and said it was coworkers or classmates. Now the condo was nearly finished, new hardwood, an updated kitchen, ocean views from every window. It wasn't just a house. It was the foundation for the life I'd been saving toward, a private practice where I could be my own person. I'd secured the medical licenses and begun building referrals. Even more satisfying than the renovations was the secret bank account I'd opened in the coastal town. Each month, I transferred money there until I had enough to vanish if I chose. They believed they knew my finances. They had no idea I could leave tomorrow and never look back. After the reunion humiliation, my cousin Jessica pulled me aside in the parking lot. She's always been the family outcast, the one who left law school to become a tattoo artist, the one Karen loves to sneer about. I can't believe they treat you like that, Jessica said, her voice sharp and fierce. They all laughed, the kind of laughter that slices and folds you inward until there's nothing left to argue with. Karen took the mic as if she owned the room and said, loud and sure, that I was nothing but dead weight and needed to start pulling my share or leave. A ripple of applause burst from the relatives. My cheeks burned. I stayed quiet, pretending the words slid off me. But inside I felt every inch of the humiliation. I'm Luna. I'm 28, and for years I've been balancing more than anyone knew. I work as a nurse practitioner at a hectic clinic downtown. I build people up when they fall apart. No one in that house knew the nights I stayed late, the shifts I covered, the overtime that paid for the roof over their heads. Jessica caught my eye across the room and squeezed my hand. After the reunion, she found me in the kitchen, voice low and fierce. You've been footing the bills, haven't you? She whispered. I told her yes, 6 years. Her face went from stunned to furious. How could they? They called you worthless while you kept their life afloat. Her anger was a kind of justice I couldn't say no to. At home, the small cruelties had gotten worse. Karen's barb strengthened the twins' meanness. They started calling me the tenant when friends were around, leaving messes and rolling their eyes at anything I said. One morning, I found my nursing awards in the trash. Karen tried to play it off, some decluttering project, but the message was clear. Then came the demand. You'll start paying $1,500 a month for rent, Karen said one morning like it was a final decree. Starting next week. Real cash, no excuses. Dad sat at the table with his paper and didn't even look up. You know how Karen gets, he said when I searched his face for support. My contributions had been invisible to them. My money was simply part of the background noise of family life. I kept paying. I'd always assumed I was doing the right thing, that family deserved help when they needed it. But tiredness collected in me like rain collecting on a roof until I couldn't ignore the leak. The humiliation at the reunion, the casual cruelty, the way my sacrifices were treated as entitlement, enough. I finished the last transfers, packed my things in the dark so no one would watch, and left a single note. Gone to find people who value me. Don't contact me. They reacted the way people who had leaned on a secret cushion always do, with panic and denial. Karen called the bank searching for explanations when the mortgage transfer didn't go through. That transfer came from an external account that's now closed, the bank told her. She tried me, phone after phone, but my line rang to nowhere. She posted on social media. She emailed. She showed up at my clinic. All of her reach found me missing. That first day the mortgage bounced. Her face turned from confusion to horror. Utility shut-off notices came like a chorus. Electric, gas, water, internet overdue. Tyler called from college, alarmed that his meal plan had been canceled. Voicemails piled up from the twin school about late tuition. Their credit cards declined. Slowly, the truth dawned on Dad, and his quiet confession, she's been paying for everything, sounded more like a verdict than relief. Jessica came over with a look I'd never seen on her before, measured, unamused. She delivered a message I'd asked her to carry for me. I'd started a practice on the coast, she said, and I wanted distance. I'd blocked them all. She didn't mean block as in petty social media behavior. She meant she'd walked away. Karen tried to drag things into apologies. We need to apologize. We have to go to her, she demanded, panicking as foreclosure notices arrived. But the apology felt thin compared to years of condescension. Jessica, who had seen the pattern for longer than most, refused to coddle them. She paid for your life while you called her worthless, she said. You wanted a servant who also paid for everything. Don't ask where she is. Their collapse didn't happen overnight, but it was inexorable. Over the next months, their household began to unravel into consequences my money had always shielded them from. The foreclosure went through. The kids had to move to public school. Karen took a job in retail to make ends meet. Dad grew older before my eyes, his face hollowed by worry. I watched it from a distance that felt oddly calm. My new life was nothing like the drama I fled. The condo by the sea smelled like salt and possibility. Mornings began with sunlight on patient charts and a coffee on the windowsill. My practice flourished. Families came because they respected my competence and my care, not because they had to. Gratitude filled the small mailbox on my refrigerator. Written notes from people I'd helped, cards taped to the door. I started a nursing scholarship in my grandmother's name, wanting to pass forward the chance that someone else might rise without being crushed first. Sometimes Dad's voicemail would appear. A shaky hello, then a plea, maybe an apology. I listened once and then deleted it. The guilt that used to sit heavy in my chest had evaporated like fog in the sun. For the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't allowed myself to name: peace. When Jessica asked if I felt bad about what happened to them, I watched the ocean and shrugged. Why should I? I said, I don't owe anyone my comfort. For years I had tried to bend myself into what my parents wanted: the dutiful daughter, the ready source of money and labor, the person who swallowed pain for the sake of the household image. I'd been kept small by those who saw my generosity as obligation. Walking away wasn't cruelty. It was the only honest option left. What I learned is simple and terrible and freeing. Your worth isn't a ledger where other people decide your balance. I gave for 6 years because I wanted to help. I left when my help was repaid with contempt. Now I spend my days surrounded by people who count me, who thank me, who let me be both generous and finite. I've stopped waiting for validation from those who never intended to give it. If there's one thing I want anyone reading this to know, it's that disappearing can be an act of survival. It doesn't make you cruel. It makes you human. Sometimes the most generous thing you can do for yourself, and for those around you in the long run, is to stop paying for other people's blindness. My story ended with books of patient notes and the sound of waves, not with guilt. If you've ever been praised for your giving and punished for your independence, you deserve better than that. Share your story, find your people, and don't be afraid to leave the house that mistook your care for an unpaid bill.